We got a few minutes. Everybody ready? Ryan, you ready? Josh, Mark, okay.
Check the audio.
He is going to go outside and get that microphone. Let me welcome everyone to this meeting of the Town Board of Commissioners for February 24, 2020. Want to welcome everyone. Also, our folks that are watching this on YouTube. We've had in the past some issues on audio. We have pre-checked the audio tonight. And also we have one of our staff members out in the parking lot tuning in to make sure that we are getting the proper audio. So with that being said, the purpose of this meeting tonight is to conduct a hearing for the planning board recommendations, proposed amendments to the Unified Development Ordinances pertaining to short-term rentals. Before I open the hearing, I want to go over some of the protocols that I've produced and have spread out throughout the community. And I hope that we can have an orderly and civil discussion and presentation of this matter tonight. The speakers who will be speaking tonight, I encourage you to address the issues related to those recommendations. That's the purpose of our hearing tonight, and I hope that you will respond to those recommendations. People that have been wishing to speak, they have been emailing in that request to our clerk, our town clerk, Gibby Shaheen. And Gibby, I want to thank you for managing this. It's been a great job for you to do, but we've gotten 27 speakers before this meeting, and now we have another, looks like we have another 10. We'll try to get to all the speakers tonight. We're here to listen. The board is here to listen. We will not be taking any final or formal action tonight. Let me just go on to some other things. We have been taking public statements, and Gibby compiled those public statements today and sent them out to the sunshine list. I saw a printed version. It's about that thick. We will continue to take public statements related to this hearing for the next 24 hours. And we will then again send out more of those public statements, and all the Board of Commissioners will get copies of those statements for their information and for them to read. We also are recording this presentation, and the speakers, there'll be a recording of everything that has been said tonight. I'm requesting that our speakers keep their remarks to 3 minutes. I will be the timekeeper. If I start to lift up the gavel, that means you're approaching that 3-minute mark. My calculations, if we were to really go smooth, we could process have about 20 speakers per hour. This means that we'll probably be here several hours to hear the feedback from the public, but that is what this is for. Let me just make sure I've got all the other things. We will not accept anonymous statements. If you have written a statement, and I think everyone has, identify your name and label it for this hearing. And as I've said before, we will be taking no final action tonight. One other thing that we've been trying to manage, or I've been trying to manage, and I hope this will work out. We have several groups that want to speak, and I've asked that if members of that particular group are willing to yield their time, they can have one representative speak on their behalf. So that is in process. I know we have two groups here tonight, and I believe we have had, people that were on the list yield that time to that one speaker. So without any further ado, let's move on. And I will need a motion from the Board of Commissioners to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Thank you very much. This public hearing is now open, and we will start the taking public comments. We would request and require that everyone who makes a public comment to come down before the board, speak into the microphone, and of course, identify yourself, and if you're for any specific group. The first person that is on our list is Derek Allen. He is the attorney representing Save Highlands. So Derek, please come forward and make your statement.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and staff, and everyone who's come out tonight. Mayor Taylor, my name is Derek Allen. I'm with Allen, Stahl & Kilbourne Law Firm in Aspen, North Carolina. I'm a land use attorney. I've been doing this 25 years this year, so I've done it all over the state. I've had this short-term rental issue a bunch in different contexts, and I know that's a difficult one. I thank you folks, the electeds. I thank the folks that are on staff. I thank the members on all sides of this issue. I do think that this kind of dialogue is very important. If you can't get fired up about something that you think is going to impact your biggest investment that you are likely to make in your life, which is your home, then I'm not sure if you're alive. So I appreciate the input that folks have had, and it's good to finally be at a microphone to be able to talk about what our concerns are. We represent the Save Highland Group as a number of plaintiffs. No secret that we have a lawsuit that's out there. Our clients are members of this community, like a lot of the folks that are in this room. I read a bunch of the comments, and I was testing myself on trying to figure out if I could tell which side of the aisle the comments were just by the first couple of paragraphs, because they all kind of sounded the same. And then I did another test, and I was trying to look down and to see where they were from, to see if I could tell which side of the issue they were on. And I can tell you those folks were all over the place too. Some were here, some were there. So that's a long way of saying there's a lot of very similar folks in this room that on either side of this issue. And I'm hoping that communication and this real dialogue and work produces an outcome that everybody can live with. This town, like other towns in Western North Carolina, like the town that I live in, the city I live in, has been a vacation spot for folks all over the East Coast and beyond since mid 1800s. It's just one of those things. We're blessed to live in places like this, and with that comes responsibilities, with that comes burdens, with that comes obligations. And I always get a chuckle when I find out who wants to play who's been here longest game. That's a tough game to win, because I promise you always find somebody who's been here a little bit longer, their family's been here a little bit longer than you have. So that's a tough game to play. Just a little bit of our lawsuit, because I think that sets up the comments that we have, and the comments are going to be pointed and brief to the mayor's point and specific. And I'll follow up either with Mr. Coward or Mr. Justice, or whoever you designate for those comments in a red line type fashion. On August 24th, 2021, we know that this town made a proclamation that short-term rentals would be treated as invalid and not allowed on January 3rd of 2022. To our group, it seemed out of the blue, and it felt like an attack on their private property rights and on those valuable things that I talked about earlier in terms of their biggest investment that they will ever make. We think it was wrong, and we set that out in an extensive complaint. And really, when you deal with elected officials like this in towns, There's not a lot of room to be able to go negotiate with you. You've got open meetings laws that you have to abide by. We felt the complaint was really our only choice at that point because of the stakes that were involved and what was set to happen on January 3rd. We think that the commissioners' actions were wrong because it was beyond their authority. I believe your town council has said as much. We think that the current UDO does not prohibit short-term rentals in any form or fashion. We think that prior town representations confirmed that. We think that there are constitutional issues that are out there with that. And maybe the biggest thing, and this is a point that we've all kind of snuck up and talked about in different silos as we've gone through the last couple of months, is this idea of grandfathering. And to be real clear about that, what I'm talking about is there is a principle in land use, there's a principle in your private property rights that's based in constitutionality. And it says, if you're doing something on your property that is a valid and authorized use, and a town or a county comes in afterwards and says that that's now illegal, you're permitted to continue doing that. It's called a valid non-conforming use. It's called a grandfathered use. That's what we talk about. We talk about vesting. True vested rights, we can get off into a tangent on that, but what I'm talking about is valid non-conforming use. And that's what these folks felt like was in jeopardy at the time. On the backside of the lawsuit that we filed, I know that this town hired outside counsel, Mr. Justice. He's very smart in land use, and we're on the same side, opposite side of these issues in and around Western North Carolina. He knows his stuff, and I think that he provided correct counsel in saying that you can't do it, and that August 24th, 2021 proclamation declaration was walked back, and that lawsuit sits out there with the motion to dismiss, and we've just let that sit. I think that you guys have let that sit, and we're letting this ordinance process play out, and Mr. Justice and I have talked about that, and we think that's the right thing to do. We just wish we were a little bit more involved in the table, but here we are now. We think like we're getting those comments and are able to say those things. With that, I'll walk through just a couple of comments I've got that are related directly to the ordinance. And for what it is, we think that the ordinance is fine the way it is, but if we're going to address it, I think that this is not a terrible first draft at it. We do have some comments and some concerns, and they fall into a couple of different buckets. And I'll just use the numbered items that are on the planning board final draft that I'm working off of, and I'll use it by the numbered items as well as the section it refers to. The first one is on number 9, section 6.5, commercial uses. We think that North Carolina case law has already determined that vacation rentals are not commercial uses, and the ordinance saying so doesn't change that. Another one that we have out there that you'll see through a couple of these comments, and I'll just refer to it as this 160D 1207C issue. That's a prohibition against registrations. We think that any kind of zoning certificate is prohibited. That issue is currently at the Court of Appeals. And I guess we'll find out from the Court of Appeals whether that stands, but we think that under the current state of the law is not allowed. And that would be all of section 6.5.10 under tourist homes, starting with no private homes. And there's a whole section on registration that we think should come out. Number 10, section 6.5, commercial uses. That's the same comment related to the fact that these are not commercial uses, they're residential uses under North Carolina case law. Under 6.5.18, it's got this registration requirement again. That's that 160D 1207C issue. The section on vesting, a couple things there. One, there is, and this is I'm referring to the zoning permits section C under that 6.5.18 in item 10. A couple things there. One, it's got this registration requirement, which we think is beyond the allowed law in North Carolina. Two, it's called vesting rights here, but vested rights here, but valid non-conforming use is the law, and that is what it is. And I don't know that having it inside of the ordinance is any more helpful than it is harmful. But the law is what it is. I think it's unnecessary at best inside of it. And to the extent it amounts to or sneaks up on having a registration requirement, I think it's invalid. The section that has the use conditions has some language, particularly in the parking section of 4. that gets into zoning type certificates, which we believe to be illegal. And a final piece on the registration, specifically as it relates to valid non-conforming uses. There's this 120-day provision where you can come in and effectively short circuit the natural process of what would happen when you challenge a non-conforming use. If my house is non-conforming use and some version of this goes forward and it's all of a sudden now prohibited going forward, I get a notice of violation from the town. I appeal that notice of violation to the zoning enforcement officer. Zoning enforcement officer would then say, okay, Mr. Allen, where's your proof that you are valid non-conforming? And so then I would show some leases, et cetera. I'm not sure that really belongs in here. If it does belong in this ordinance, I think it's probably a separate section that would apply to all valid non-conforming uses and not just short-term rentals. If you're gonna have that kind of section, it seemed like it would equally apply. And finally, the last section 12 there, 7.2.1, limitations on non-conforming uses. Again, I think that non-conforming uses, I think the law is clear on it. I think that if you're going to recite what the state of existing law is on it, I think this needs some work if it's going to be more comprehensive. Frankly, I don't believe it belongs there at all. I think it's superfluous at best and confusing at worst. I'll leave my comments there. I will provide these revisions or suggested revisions to Mr. Coward, Mr. Justice, or anyone else you direct. I thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to express my appreciation to Mr. Justice for being here tonight, observing and listening to the comments that are being presented.
Well, if anybody calls me smart, I'd like to be in the room when that happens.
Okay. All right, very good. All right, the next person who is requested to speak would be David C. Hageman. Is David here? There we go. Josh, what's?
This is taking up my time.
No.
I was kidding.
Oh, we certainly will. Yes, sir. Yeah, but that will be done. Yes. What are we doing? You want to turn, you want the mics off? You think that would help? Yeah, let's turn those mics off, please.
Turn them off.
Yes. Hopefully that'll help. I'll leave my mic on until an appropriate time. Apologize for the acoustics. This building has been a challenge for us for a number of years. So, Mr. Hagerman, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Dave Hageman. I own a home on Wyandotte for 3 years. I'm a semi-retired attorney. I live in Athens, Georgia. I'm a professor at the University of Georgia School of Law, and I'm also a mediator. I started renting my home occasionally last year just to help pay expenses. I'm opposed to the proposed STR changes for these reasons. I learned in law school a phrase that applies to this situation: bad facts make bad law. Sure, there's a small number of STR renters who make noise, leave trash out, and understandably that annoys the neighbors. I get that totally. But those bad facts don't require a bad law, which I believe is the proposed ordinance. If renters make noise, enforce the noise laws. If they leave trash out, fine the owners. I think that the STR proposal is a drastic answer to a problem that would make bad law. I know very few of the people who support the STR restrictions, and I'm sure they're all very good people. I can tell, however, from reading some of the comments that they've said, that it appears that they care pretty much only about themselves and not the other people that are involved in this problem. They don't care about people like my housekeeper, who talking to me the other day broke down in tears because she's going to lose the income from cleaning houses that she now has from short-term rentals. I don't think they care about the workers who fix our plumbing problems, the retail people who sell us things in stores, many of whom will lose their jobs because of the loss of business that will probably occur if this short-term ordinance proposal is adopted. They certainly don't care about me and my property rights and the income that I would receive from short-term rentals of my house. These people want to turn the clock back to what they refer to old Highlands. They're comfortable, they've made it, they've got a summer home here, they've got a permanent home here. And they apply to what this saying is. They're up on the ladder and now they pulled the ladder out so nobody else can get up there. I've rented out my house to couples who all say to me, we want a short-term rental here. We don't want to be in a hotel. We want the house. We want to come here with our family and other couples. They want weekend rentals. I expect the economic impact, the negative economic impact from greatly restricting STRs in R1 and 2 could be catastrophic to the town, the merchants in this town, concerning the loss of revenue. Do you commissioners know, do you have any idea what the economic impact is going to be for this proposed STR ordinance? If you do, I haven't heard. So I'm asking you in closing, before you take the drastic step of adopting this STR, this very restrictive STR, that you conduct an economic impact study. It's not that hard to do. You need to know the effect on the town and the merchants and the people who live here and make their living here, what the economic impact is going to be if you outlaw short-term rentals. Anything less than that, in my opinion, would be a serious dereliction of your duties as elected officials of this town. Thank you for hearing me out.
All right, our next speaker was Lila Howland, but she has yielded to Charlie Nalbaum, who will be speaking for the Neighborhood Association. Charlie.
Good evening, Mayor Taylor and Commissioners. My name is Charlie Nalbone. I'm here tonight speaking for the Highlands Neighborhood Coalition, which is a broad-based grassroots group of individual neighbors from Highlands single-family neighborhoods and many of Highlands neighborhood and civic associations. I'm also speaking on behalf of Lila Howland, Bill Long, Mike Magaha, and Carol Gable, who have graciously agreed to yield their time to me.
Mhm.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to address this very important issue. We expect that tonight, and we already have heard, that in addition to hearing from neighbors and neighborhoods, we will hear from investors and business people who own, operate, or otherwise profit from short-term rentals in our single-family neighborhoods. We expect that what we will hear from these short-term rental investors will be some version of either the law should be changed so that I can operate my short-term rental to make as much money as possible, or I have to be allowed to operate my short-term rental business because I can't afford the property otherwise, or if short-term rentals are, if the prohibition on short-term rentals are enforced, the town's economy will collapse. Well, we've already heard all three of those, and I expect we will hear from others the same thing. What you will hear from the neighbors and residents of our town is quite different. None of us are doing anything different with our homes than what we have done for decades, simply living in and trying to enjoy our homes and what until recently were the peaceful, quiet residential neighborhoods that made Highlands such a special town. A successful town uses its zoning laws to encourage and balance growth in the community while protecting its residential neighborhoods. Our current UDO designates places for commerce, hotels and other overnight accommodations, and shops, while giving residential areas commerce-free environments for homeowners to enjoy living in Highlands without being forced to live next to a business. All we ask is that the long-term, close to 50-year prohibition on the commercial activity of overnight accommodations be maintained and enforced so that we as neighbors can once again go back to enjoying Highlands and our neighborhoods. We've followed the work and deliberations of the planning board over the last few months. And although we appreciate the service of this all-volunteer board, respectfully, on the short-term rental issue, they simply got it wrong. The planning board's proposal overturns decades of Highlands land use policy that, with the exception of customary home occupations in the R2 and R3 zones and highly regulated tourist homes in the R2 zones, which, by the way, include that the owner or operator must be resident on site, kept all commercial activities, including overnight accommodations, such as short-term rentals, tourist homes, hotels, motels, inns, bed and breakfasts out of Highlands single-family neighborhoods. Remember, overnight accommodations are defined in the town's UDO as a commercial use. Tourist homes are a commercial use. Bed and breakfasts are a commercial use. Hotels and motels are a commercial use. And even though it has been Highlands' long-term policy that these commercial activities create an intensity of use that is not compatible with our single-family neighborhoods, the planning board's proposal opens up every single one of Highlands' neighborhoods to these commercial activities. One of the arguments that we're likely to hear tonight from the short-term rental investors is that the UDO doesn't specifically say short-term rental. It doesn't have to. Short-term rentals are overnight accommodations, and overnight accommodations are designated a commercial use. Any claim that a short-term rental is not an overnight accommodation is simply absurd. The planning board's proposal for the first time allows tourist homes in the R1 zone, a zone which previously never permitted any commercial activity. Picture the chaos in our R1 neighborhoods if even just half the homes in Shelby Place or Little Bear Pen or any other neighborhood were turned into tourist homes hosting weekend renters every weekend for the latest downtown festival or destination wedding. The planning board's proposal also opens up all of Highlands neighborhoods to whole house short-term rentals. And even though they attempted to diminish the negative consequences of these commercial activities by imposing a 14-day minimum rental period in R1 and a 7-day minimum rental period in R2, even members of the planning board recognized and stated that this would translate into 2 weekend rentals per month in R1 and 4 weekend rentals per month in R2. Picture the chaos in all of Highlands neighborhoods if even just half the homes in a neighborhood were rented every other weekend by short-term renters attending the latest downtown festival or yet another wedding. Finally, the planning board's proposal grants vested rights status to the short-term rental investors who, contrary to existing law, have been operating overnight accommodations in Highlands residential neighborhoods. This is not legally required. It rewards unlawful behavior, and it punishes Highlands law-abiding homeowners. In addition, to grandfather this use would require that it was previously legal. It is not. It is an overnight accommodation and cannot be grandfathered. The planning board's proposal is completely contrary to the clear and unequivocal desire of the vast majority of Highlands residents that short-term rentals should be eliminated from our residential neighborhoods. Most recently, the residents' and voters' opposition to short-term rentals was clearly expressed in the municipal election results, where candidates opposed to short-term rentals won by an overwhelming landslide majority. This position was also clearly expressed in the response to the community plan survey, where more than 62% of the respondents expressed opposition to short-term rentals. And remember, this survey was also open to the business community, so that 62% opposition to short-term rentals is very likely an underrepresentation of the actual level of opposition. We don't know why or how it happened, but the planning board's recommendations do not reflect the will of the residents and voters of Highlands. Their proposal should be, and we're asking the Board of Commissioners to reject it in its entirety. Respectfully, we ask that the town honor its obligation to the residents of our single-family neighborhoods and enforce the existing prohibition on short-term rentals. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your hard work on this matter. I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
Thank you. Let me make one comment. As I said, when we open this hearing, we will maintain civil order. And I require that everyone respect the speaker's right to make a comment, and I will not entertain outbreaks in this audience that are inappropriate. We will ask that person to be leaving the audience if we can't contain our comments while someone is speaking. With that said, our next speaker is Pat Allen. Yes, is the audio better? Okay,
I'll speak. Can you hear me?
yeah, speak out loud. Thank
I
you.
talk loud anyway.
Sure.
Okay, I'm Pat Allen, a real estate broker and resident full-time in Highlands for 28 years. Brokers have sold homes in town for 20+ years and rentals were allowed. In fact, 2 years ago, one of the commissioners sold a home and told the buyer face to face, yes, you can rent short term. Now he wants to ban them in all 3 districts. This is certainly a conflict of interest. The Chamber's agency, Highlands Vacation Rentals, Landmark Realty, and Country Club Properties have all done short-term rentals, and the town collected tax revenue from those. The objectors and those who brought the lawsuit against the town saying they should be banned bought homes in neighborhoods with no HOA restrictions, of which they were made aware before closing. They now want the town to protect them from nuisance renters. The town attorney should have nipped this in the bud, but didn't, allowing us to be in litigation with enormous costs on both sides. There are already rules in place for noise disturbances in town, and they just need to be enforced, whether it's renters or homeowners. Homeowners who rent out their homes should have specific instructions in place regarding trash and parking. One concern I have is that the planning board, who are all volunteers, have been asked by the mayor to make recommendations regarding short-term rentals and submit them to the commissioners. That is a daunting task, and at a previous meeting, 4 members did not even know where the various zones were located. 2 of the members have spoken out and are adamantly opposed to any short-term rentals, and it is personal regarding their neighborhoods. 2 members live in country clubs that don't allow short-term rentals. So how can they know what is best for homeowners in town and be allowed to dictate how they use their homes? Has there been an in-depth study on the negative economic impact on businesses and revenue it will cost the town if you ban STRs? It has not been mentioned at any meeting I've attended. This is a slippery slope, and the commissioners who are elected by voters who must live in town should be the ones discussing all aspects of this extremely important decision that will affect the lives and livelihood of homeowners and the future of Highlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Mhm. Our next speaker is Christy Jones Favali.
Hello. I'm Christy Favali, and I'd like to highlight some of the unintended consequences of the proposed UDO as it pertains to some issues around the town of Highlands. 1, workforce housing. Short-term rentals have been a scapegoat for workforce housing issues. This UDO will not be a step towards creating affordable housing in Highlands. Even if every short-term rental owner flooded the market with their properties, the time has long passed that an in-town property will sell for under $400,000. I'm no banker, but people making $15 to $20 an hour simply will never be able to afford a house in Highlands, regardless of this UDO passing, without some sort of subsidy from the town of Highlands. But in reality, the reality is affordable housing is actually more grim because of the unintended consequences of this UDO. If any rental in town, anyone in town who wants to rent their property will now be forced to buy outside the town limits and in the neighboring communities of Otto, Scaly, and Glenville, further eliminating affordable housing and pricing out the locals and tradesmen that service Highlands. Secondly, inflated real estate prices, also not due to short-term rentals, but another issue this UDO is supposed to correct. This is not a Highlands specific issue. It's a nationwide issue in all desirable areas. The Zoomtown phenomenon, Salesforce, Facebook, Twitter, Google, and many other Fortune 500 companies giving the green light for their employees to permanently work remotely has caused an exodus from the major cities into rural towns. Win Hall, Vermont, a similar town to ours in numbers. In 2020, a population of 750, and in 1 year, there's a 25% increase in population and a 47% increase in home pricing. And these are year-over-year projections. Catskills, Breckenridge, all experiencing similar phenomenons. My last and most important point as it pertains to the UDO is enforcement. If enforcement is put in place, it should be enforced unilaterally for all people in this community and not targeted at a segment of homeowners who rent their properties. I've rented for years without harassment, yet from the moment my property was identified as a rental, I've had my exterior breakers manually shut off on 2 occasions, as confirmed by Edwards Electric. Other homeowners have had similar reports of their bear-proof trash cans being thrown open overnight, just waiting for the bears to help themselves. I understand from Chief Holland that someone can be charged with a misdemeanor for false complaints. Many of us have had to get cameras and decibel meters on our homes to protect ourselves. We are homeowners here too and deserve to be protected by the same laws and ordinances that govern us and not simply targeted by them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathy Smith.
I'm going to sort of turn
Okay,
this
that's
a little
fine.
bit. Before I start, I just have to say one thing. We can all agree that this spring weather has been incredible the last few days. Well, I'll just cut to the chase. Oh, okay. I'll just cut to the chase. I'm in the camp of those who want to put a brake on uncontrolled growth of STRs in Highlands. There are a lot of angles to that discussion, and I'm just going to focus on one. The average person may not realize that the Highlands Chamber of Commerce is a major driver in the demand for STRs. Our little town is being promoted all over this country, and our chamber is developing new and new events and festivals and so forth that attracts people. And each one of these need an STR. I know that more visitors mean more business for Main Street, and that's fine. That's the goal of the Chamber of Commerce, and that's their job. But we have a little conflict of interest. The residents who support a healthy community need to consider our support for this direction, this current direction of our chamber. I will say, I realize that OEI and our real estate agents promote our town nationally too, and that's fine. That's private enterprise. But I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to keep my focus very narrow. But I will say, I don't think we Highlands residents owe the wedding industry our town or our way of life. That's just my place, my position. Back to the chamber. I think we just need to let our leadership know that not all of us are in favor of developing more and more events and promoting them all over the country. We have to speak up, let our feelings be known. Highlands has families who've been here for generations. And it includes all kinds of people. from all kinds of economic backgrounds. And that is the community that we've invested our lives and our hearts into. And uncontrolled growth of STRs is a threat to that. It's not the same old game of come up and rent a house for a couple of weeks. We're into something different here. And if we're not careful, Highlands is going to be a revolving door of transient weekend and week-long visitors. And I don't want to live in a mountain town theme park. And that's kind of where we're headed. So we all just need to stop and think a little bit and consider all these different angles. And I appreciate you all on the board. You've all done a good job and you work hard, and I thank you. That's it. Did I make it in 3 minutes?
Yes, you did. Thank
All
you.
right, open it up.
Our next speaker is David B.
Good evening. My name is David B. I am the owner of Highlands Vacation Rentals. Highlands has enjoyed having a vacation rental market for at least 30 years, the length of time that I've lived here, and even longer than that. In my opinion, this board has made a knee-jerk reaction without doing their proper due diligence or any fiscal impact to its decision. This knee-jerk reaction has created division, false accusations, and hateful discourse between its neighbors. To my knowledge, no one in the Highlands area that has a short-term rental or manages short-term rentals was contacted for input on issues and concerns about how to make things overall better. That's not proper due diligence. Many have made complaints about garbage. Meanwhile, my office has to contact the town on an average of once per week because trash is not picked up at many locations. This process should take at least a year to do the proper due diligence, discussions, and legal examinations. You have placed yourself and others in a position of having to spend thousands of unnecessary legal dollars. That was suggested by one of the board members, but it was not heeded. You are creating an ordinance that has future legal ramifications for the town. You are creating an ordinance which takes away owner property rights. I am in favor of short-term rentals in all residential districts within the town. They are not the detriment or negative impact as has been portrayed. I am not in favor of removal of owners' property rights, yours or anyone else's. Before making this decision, there needs to be a true diverse panel with discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alice Phillips.
Hello, my name is Allison Phillips. I'm with Country Club Properties and Vacation Rentals owned by Terry Potts. Prior to that, I was with Prudential Highlands Cashers Real Estate and Vacation Rentals. I have managed short-term vacation rentals in Highlands for 22 years. In my time as a property manager, I've never experienced any major issues with any of my rentals that negatively impacted the town or our neighbors. I also sell real estate, with the majority of my sales being to renters who fell in love with Highlands and decided to make the decision to purchase a home for themselves. Some of who have since retired and are full-time members of the community, while others who are not in a position to retire rely on the income from their short-term rentals to supplement the cost of ownership and prevent their homes from being vacant when they're absent from town. It is my opinion that this decision has been made in haste, and there needs to be additional due diligence and discussion on both the impact that this will cause and the true issues that are the reason for this change. I am in favor of short-term rentals in all of our Highlands residential districts. I am not in favor of the town removing owners' property rights, and I have great concern about the impacts of this decision on the future property values and marketability of the properties in Highlands. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list is Tom Coley. Okay, thank you. The next person on the list will be Cal Stevens.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Cal Stevens. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. My wife and I purchased a place in the country, in the Country Club of Highlands back in, I guess it was April now. And I just want to thank the planning board for this great first draft. We are renting our place short term. We are not, faceless, nameless, horrible people to want to have a piece of property and rent it and enjoy staying in it too. I think that we should have started with this ordinance as a first draft, as opposed to the decision to call out short-term rentals as an illegal action. I would encourage you all to continue to push forward with this ordinance. We are largely in support of the things that are in it. And I think it's great for a group of all-volunteer board to put that together. It recognizes our vested property rights, which, contrary to what I've heard, was clearly allowed in Highlands before the current UDO. And I appreciate you all and your time. I yield the rest of my time to this Save Highlands group. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Puckett.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff and neighbors, and not very good at this. Okay, I'm gonna read from what I have prepared because I have a few points to make. Okay, 1 second and I will. Anyway, I guess I'll just wing it because I pretty much am going to repeat what everybody else is saying here. My husband and I recently fulfilled our dream and bought a house in Highlands after renting here since actually I was a little girl. My parents brought me here and we would rent vacation rentals here. We've been renting, my husband and I with our 4 children have been renting properties here for over 30 years. So we finally, mid last year, bought a house and decided that we were going to eventually retire here and rent it part of the time while we weren't here until that time came along. And now, much to our surprise, this all comes up just a few months later after I, called the city and everything, talked to the planning board, and was said no problem at all. Vacation rentals are prevalent here. You can rent in any district. I don't know when the new interpretation of the UDO came out, but the way I understand it, you're saying if a use is not an allowed use in an area, then it is not allowed. And that's the way it's being interpreted now, from what I understand. Given that rationale, that would mean a regular rental would not be allowed, a long-term rental, because it is not specified as an allowed use in any district specifically. So, and the other thing that one of the other gentlemen said was that if something is an overnight accommodation, then it's commercial use. Well, isn't any single family home an overnight accommodation? Just, to be perfectly honest. And I basically think that we should have had a a meeting of the minds, and all stakeholders should be pulled in to look at this problem. If it is a problem, I don't know how many actual complaints you actually have with short-term rentals as opposed to regular homes, but I think that the stakeholders should be involved in developing something going forward. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
my husband is yielding his time to me.
Okay. Our next speaker then would be Carol Ragsdale.
Hi, it's Caroline Ragsdale. I purchased my home in Mirror Lake the summer of 2018 and could not be happier to be part of this special town. As a realtor who planned to rent my home to defray costs before I'm able to retire here, I did a lot of due diligence before I started looking for property. I read the UDO, I spoke to my realtor and many others who assured me that people have been renting their homes in Highlands since Highlands was founded. We're a resort town. Comfortable with that information, I began renting my home, but with very strict rules about occupancy, noise, trash, number of cars on site, and absolutely no parties or events. I have been blessed to have lovely guests, the majority of which are families who respect my home and the neighborhood. They love Highlands and visit often. Renting homes gives them an affordable option to staying in a hotel, which doesn't work well if you have young children. I like that I can share my home and all that is special about Highlands with my guests. I would like to thank the Planning Board, the Board of Commissioners, the plaintiffs, and the lawyers on both sides of this important issue for the long hours that they have put in. I have a couple of concerns about the proposed changes to the ordinance. I'm concerned about posting my personal information on a sign on the exterior of my home. This is an invitation to be robbed and would look unsightly. What about maintaining a database that the police and the fire department could access on their phones? I'm also concerned about how fairly noise and trash complaints will be handled. There needs to be an appeals process and the owner needs to be notified at the time of the complaint. STR owners and owners who don't rent need to be treated the same. I support short-term rentals and property rights and hope that you will consider my statement and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Scott Buchanan.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Appreciate the time to be here. Very blessed to be here. And very thankful to be here. My wife and I started coming to Highlands over 25 years ago. I brought her here for Valentine's Day and stayed what was before the old Edwards Inn. And we fell in love with the place. Even though we both went to Western Carolina, we were never able to afford to come over here. Unlike some people, I'm not a trust fund baby. I wasn't born into money. I've worked very hard for everything I've ever accomplished. Felt very fortunate in 2017 to be able to buy a home here because our family had grown. We had our children had gotten married. We were having our first grandchild. We bought a home in R2 off Foreman Road, and just very blessed to have been able to come over the years. And over those 25 years, we began staying in hotels when it was just me and my wife. But then when we had children, we would rent homes in town so that we could go to town and enjoy the walking around town, enjoy the Greenway. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I view this as we're not property owners, we're property stewards. None of us really own these properties. We will pass these properties along to our children or to our grandchildren, or we'll eventually sell these properties. We are temporary caretakers of these properties. So it's in our best interest to take care of them. And I'm speaking on behalf of Save the Highlands group. And when I rent my property, I rent it to people I know. I rent it to my pastor and his family. I rent it to members of our church, whether it's a weekend or whether it's a long week, whether it's a month. I had one couple that reached out to me from Florida that wanted to rent for a whole month. It was him and his wife and a dog, and they were great. Yes, they took very good care of my property. So I'm very particular on who I rent to. the small amount of rental income that we're able to receive barely covers any costs whatsoever. I mean, it's minimal at all. You know, it's really non-existent. In 2020, our home burnt down on Foreman, and due to time constraints, due to the fact that it was going to cost so much to rebuild there, we found two properties on Raoul, which is an R2, 121 and 125 Raoul. One was currently VRBO and the other one was in disrepair and needed to be updated. So we made the choice to purchase those based on the realtor's information that we could rent the properties out. So we began the process of renovating that home, spending approximately so far, I think $220,000 just in renovation costs, and we're not done yet. So there's a lot of people that depend on the upfit of these properties. I see a number of homes around town that are vacant and have been sitting vacant and are in disrepair, and I just can't understand for the life of me why someone would let a house sit there vacant. At least let somebody use it, you know, to keep it up. With that said, I look forward to retiring here at some point. I'm not at that point yet. Almost permanently retired here, but thanks to some members of town and a member of the board, I'm able to enjoy my grandchildren, be able to bring them up, teach them to fly fish, and look forward to inviting friends and family up to stay in our home. And if they choose to make a donation, great. If not, I'm fine with that as well. So it's nothing different from permanent residents having overnight guests that either take them out to dinner or choose to make a donation for their stay. But that's my point of view. And I think that we're all in this together. We want to keep Highlands. It will never be a Gatlinburg. And I don't know where people get that idea that the town just constraints does not allow for that.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, our next speaker is Jennifer Huff.
Mr. Mayor, Town Commissioners, citizens of Highlands, I am Jennifer Huff, and I'd like to thank the Planning Board for their diligent work in drafting this UDO. We appreciate the legally recognized non-conforming use language and look forward to continuing the use of our property as how it's been allowed in the past. I'm a supporter of short-term rentals, but more importantly, property rights. I feel much of this situation and subsequent division of the town could have been avoided had we been given the opportunity to have a seat at the table. We asked numerous times, but it fell on deaf ears. Had there been an opportunity to sit down and talk with one another, I truly feel things would not be where they are today. In fact, we came close to a working meeting with all sides once, but we were informed the day before the meeting that it was canceled. That was very disappointing, and I thought it was a shame. You asked that we limit our personal experiences, but this issue is quite personal to everyone in this room, but for different reasons. The short-term rental owners overall are good, honest people, and we want to continue to provide a place to stay for our guests. They want to stay in homes, not hotels, for various reasons. We want to be good stewards of the community, and most of us run a very strict short-term rental with rules that the vast majority of our guests happily follow. But if there are problems, the solution lies in enforcement of already existing ordinances. There's been talk that we aren't part of this community, but many of us live here full-time, and others have been coming up here for years, if not generations. We have local friends and neighbors. We enable a large positive economic impact in this community, our collective community. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to address what keeps bubbling up, that we are somehow to blame for the lack of affordable housing in this area. You need to look no further than Asheville to see this. They prohibited short-term rentals years ago, yet they still have the worst affordable housing issue in the entire state. In fact, the town was presented with an opportunity to build affordable housing by the hospital, but in October 2020, the majority of the board voted against it.
It's now being taken on by respected business owners to solve this problem. The town is responsible for fixing this, yet have not done so. It's a false assumption that those of us who own a STR will automatically convert it to a short-term rental. Again, I do want to thank the planning board and all the people who have been involved for their diligent work. And we look forward to integrating into this community, first on a temporary basis, and then most of us permanently before long. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Richard Melvin.
I wanted to make a couple comments. I haven't had the opportunity to come to the town board meetings and other meetings. And I think it's good to have this meeting. Some time ago, when this issue first came up, there was a citation of a case that was being passed around and so forth, that if the ordinance that we have is not specific and could be interpreted in different ways and so forth, that it had to be thrown out. And that's all right as far as it goes. There are some cases on that when you draw up restrictions for private subdivisions. If you're not specific, the courts will interpret it in favor of unrestricted use of property. That's a private covenant. But the rule is exactly the opposite for a governmental ordinance. It's interpreted broadly and reasonably in accordance with its intent. And I just want to make that point. I don't know whether it's been discussed among the town board or otherwise or not, but there's a number of cases on that. And I haven't studied the ordinance. It's been amended so many times and all. But the town attorney, who's paid by the town, has given the opinion that in R1, it's clear that STRs are not allowed. I think that's correct. I'm not speaking to R2 and R3. But until that opinion is overturned, that's the law in Highlands from the town attorney. And he has given his opinion that that is clear as to R1. I'm not speaking as to R2, R3, may or may not be. Secondly, there's been a lot of talk about grandfathering and vested rights by different people. To be entitled to have something grandfathered in or be vested, it has to be a lawful use to begin with. So if it is correct that it's not lawful in R1, then you can't have a vested right. You may be able to have it in R2 or R3. I'm not giving an opinion on that. You can be a bank robber all your life. That doesn't give you a right to rob another bank. It has to be lawful to begin with, to be vested. And I'd like to make one other comment on that. And that is, if we get into too much grandfathering and vesting, if it's determined that these uses are not lawful, whether they've been customary or people have done it or whatever is not relevant, whether they were lawful under our ordinance, if you start grandfathering in, what you're going to run into is exactly the opposite. You're going to have a problem with spot zoning because all the ones that supposedly are vested and grandfathered are going to be considered to be spot zone. Instead of having a zone for an entire neighborhood or a block or something like that, you're going to have little parcels here, parcels there, and they're going to be considered spot zoning. So I just want to mention that too.
Thank you.
While I'm on my feet and I have the floor, I'd like to mention one other thing. There's been a lot of talk.
Your time is getting close.
About economics. Am I over 3 minutes?
Yes.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, our next speaker will be Holly Campbell. Okay, thank you. Mhm. The next speaker will then be June Wise.
Hello, I'm June Wise. I'm a real estate broker in Georgia, Atlanta specifically, and also in North Carolina. I have a lot of respect for homes, private homes, short terms, whatever. I love them all. And I grew up in a small community, a very small community. And this is why this feels like home to me. I will say I bought my first place here in 2001, and loved it. But I renovated it and sold it. And so I bought another one immediately, and it's up on Oak here in the neighborhood, and I loved it. And I talked to Country Club Properties, Allison, I actually handled my house for a while, and said that I could rent it, and I did. Why not? I was a single lady, and it made good sense to just let it sort of cover. So I rent it now still about, 6 months a year, maybe. And that's it. But I respect what you're all saying on both sides, having been in both places. However, I do want to say the people that come are good folks. They are you and they are I. They're just like, we are. And I'm curious and would love to know how many people here did come, they rented, they liked it, they played golf, they fished, they hiked, and they wanted to stay and now have become permanent residents. My husband now and I expect to become Highland permanent residents and still keep our home in Atlanta, but move back and forth a little bit because, we have a basis there. But the economics also is a big issue because these people pay 9.75% in taxes to our state, and 3% of that comes to Macon County. So they are contributing in that way, and they flood these beautiful little boutiques and the restaurants. And I think they offer something. And I'm sorry, and I don't know what the issues have been. I was stunned when all this came up, but I really would like to know what in the world has happened that, here we all sit, and what, where, whom, how often, and why hasn't something been done at the time? You got a problem, deal with it right then. Good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
God bless.
I might have lost my place. Okay, Sarah Benson is our next speaker.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor
evening.
and Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak. I do not have a prepared statement, but I wanted to tell you I am a third generation homeowner in Highlands. I live in my grandparents' house, and Highlands is my touchstone. When my father passed away, I had to buy out 13 first cousins. So I do have a mortgage, I have taxes and expenses. I rent my home out about 6 months out of the year. And I'm in favor of the Safe Highlands group, and I support property rights and short-term rentals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Don DeBat. Okay. All right. Then our next speaker will be Stephanie McCall.
Hi, I'm Stephanie McCall. I'm a local business owner. I raise my kids here. I look around everybody here, and I think it breaks my heart really that this has to come about like this, because there's people here on both sides of the aisles that I consider my friends. There's quite a few people here that I have worked for in the past. And I am here just to say short-term rentals is a way for my children to come back here and work. I currently work for quite a few people, and they have me redo their houses. I also own a short-term rental. Both of my children are involved in it. I love this town. I would do nothing to harm it. And anybody that comes into our rentals, we try to be very conscientious about what they're doing. We do have rules and regulations. We have no problem with rules and regulations to keep our town the way it is. Again, I have no desire to harm it. I own a construction company. Probably 6 out of the last 10, there is actually a few clients here right now. They've done it for short-term rental. They've come in and made these houses to be very gorgeous houses, and they spent their money. And they come here. They also love Highlands. They don't just come here to see how much money they can make. Are they doing it to make money? Absolutely. But they are also conscientious about making the area that they live in, the neighborhood, look better. And their houses do look better when we come in and renovate them and make them nice. And it does, I mean, they bring money into town, and everybody says, well, that's not the town that we once knew. It's not going to change. If we stop having short-term rentals, it's not going to change it. They're going to come somewhere. Highlands is out. I mean, we know that's Highlands, but we're not going to lose our town. Our town is us. It's the people. We're not going to lose who we are. Not in my opinion. It's not going to change me if I have one short-term rental or 10. And so I feel like we still have an amazing community that cares about each other and lifts each other up. And whether we let rentals come in or not is not going to change that. And I was at a recent board meeting and heard you guys, someone on the board said, well, I don't think we should let someone raffle off their house for charity and let somebody stay there. And I thought, we don't have the right to give our property to someone and let them stay there and to better that program. I mean, that's what Highlands is based on, is helping each other. And I was just shocked that we would come to a point where we were telling somebody on their private property that they may not could let a charity benefit from our home. So as always, I appreciate everything you've done. I've sat on many boards myself. I have a great respect for what you do. I have a great respect for my town and the people in it. And I don't want it to be divisive. I see so many people here, like I said, on both sides of the aisle. And I still want to be able to go to church with them and work with them and live with them and make our town, continue to make our town better. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frida Bennett.
Thank you for letting us be here today. And I wouldn't have your job for $1 million. So thank you for what you do. And very quickly, I guess I'm speaking from, I don't know about the us and the them, but I do know about living in a community that is more than likely 20% short-term rentals now. And I can't express to you the changes it makes. I can't call you on the phone and complain. All I can tell you is that it makes a difference, a huge difference in the community. We don't complain. That's not Highlanders for the most part, but it is what it is. I figure whatever the law says, you will enact, you will make it legal or illegal, and that will be it. So I would like to speak to something that I found on December 13th for the planning board notes. Because everybody's expressed other opinions, and I feel you're bound by the law, and that's what you will do. But I wonder about the going forward. There are so many of us, and I do think there are many, on my mountain or our hill. We have people who have lived there for decades that are deciding that the quality of life is just not what they had once experienced. That's personal. It's not an insult to anyone or any group of people. But I do look at the going forward, and I wonder if we are going to punish the people who obeyed the law, perhaps intentionally or coincidentally, but they did not turn their homes into STRs. And with the going forward, as I read it on the December 13th notes, what was passed said that you can't convert any more properties to STRs, while my neighbor can transfer ownership of the STR property. That makes it very hard for people who might decide they have to leave, that they just do not think they can live surrounded by STRs. Once again, whatever the law says is the law. I will abide. But I do hope you will look at that and consider it, because it's very hard to know that someone who came in and did not conform to ordinances might be rewarded, while those who did conform, perhaps, I don't know if you can call it punishment, but anyway, thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mike King. Mike? Okay, we'll move on then. The next speaker is Jerry Moore.
Good evening, commissioners and folks in attendance. I've been a Highlands resident for 15 years, raised my 4 kids here. I had a small business on Main Street for 12 years. During that time, I was able to purchase 2 fixer-uppers and turn them into short-term rentals. It was a lot of work. It's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed renting my home. I love this community, and I do a lot to show my love for this community as often as I can. And I think a lot of people out here do too. I see a lot of people who are my friends that have one position that's different than mine, but I still love them. They're still my friends, and I think I'm still their friend. And I think this is an awesome community. Look how many people are here because they care about the community one way or the other. So talk about being blessed. We're blessed as a community. But with regard to the legal issues and with the short-term rental issue, I think we need more research before we make any drastic changes that will change some people's lives significantly, others not so much. We don't even know exactly how many short-term rentals we have in town limits. How many short-term rentals are owned by corporations? We don't know that. I hear that all the time. How many corporations own 1 or 2 or 3 or more? How many individuals own 1 short-term rental and rent it out and come up here for short periods of time so they can enjoy our community just like we do that live here year-round? How many complaints have we had regarding short-term rentals? How many ordinance violations have we issued to people who own a short-term rental? Have we fined those people? Have we enforced our current ordinances to the fullest extent before we make any drastic changes on something that we've been doing for some time in this community? I don't know. I haven't heard those answers. Maybe this board has them. Maybe the attorney has them. Maybe this information has been gathered. What I've been given is we have a dozen or so complaints that are specific to short-term rentals. What other business limitations will be put into place into R2 or R1 or R3? Will you be able to be an eBay seller in R2? Can you sell stuff out of your home? Is that allowed? That's commercial activity. Right now it is. You're supposed to get a special use permit. I don't know how many of those we issue for that. Can you run an art studio out of your home? Can you run a construction office out of your home? What differentiates that type of business from a short-term rental? I think we just have to ask ourselves those questions, because if this gets passed and we go to court, those are the analogies that are going to get brought up. How are you going to enforce this is the big question. That is, how does this happen if you have 14 days, less than 14 days in R2, but it could be less than 7 days in certain locations if the adjacent property is not residential, 14 days in R1, but if you're vested, no limitations in R1. I mean, Chief Holland, you're going to have to hire a lot more people to make that happen. I mean, we have a grid that you've given us, what's permitted, what's limited. It's problematic. I would propose this because I know I'm going to run out of time. Limit occupancy. That's one of the biggest issues I hear. It's a 4-bedroom house, 20 people are in there. That's easily enforceable. Call the police. They come out. How many people are living here? It's only allowed for 8. You got to leave. Limit parking. How many cars are parked here? That's another problem I hear. They block the roads. Easy to enforce. Call the police. They come out. You got 3 cars. You got to come out again. We're towing or we're fining. Enforce trash. Enforce noise. If homeowners don't obey, fine the homeowners, have an escalating fine. Keep it simple. This current ordinance is not simple. It's going to be impossible to enforce. And let me tell you, short-term rentals are not all bad. Your neighbor, they come, you don't like them, they leave. You can't always pick that with your own neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeannie Chambers.
Try to speak loud. I don't usually have that problem.
Just pull
My
the
name
mic
is,
toward you then.
my name is Jeannie Chambers. I own and operate along with my husband, Chambers Realty and Vacation Rentals. First of all, I'd like to thank the planning board and the town board for all the time and effort put into the issue of short-term rentals in Highlands. I believe the work is far from over. And my hope and prayer is that the outcome will be fair and just for all concerned. We've been asked to limit our time and words so that we all have a chance to speak. And we've also been asked to limit our personal experience and address the recommendations from the planning board, which I'll do. I'm not known for being brief, but I'll try my best to only address the ones most concerning to me and my business, which includes management of vacation rentals in and around Highlands. All of these statements pertain to the planning board's recommendations for zone R1 and R2. Regarding the first recommendation, less than 7-day rentals being forbidden in R1 and allowed in R2 with limitations based on location adjacent land use. I disagree with this recommendation. I believe short-term rentals should be allowed in any residential zone in Highlands. Regarding the third recommendation of whole house short-term rentals being limited to 14 nights minimum stay, I disagree with this recommendation wholeheartedly and reference the above. Regarding the 10th recommendation, while I agree with the suspension of the owner's right to continue to rent for a 6-month period, if 3 violations have occurred, I believe the wording needs to be changed to ensure that violations are confirmed and validated by the Highlands Police Department. This is to ensure that malicious and false claims aren't being used to limit a neighbor or neighborhood's use of short-term rentals. Having a little time left, I want to add a few personal words. I moved here in 1990 and joined the family business, the Chambers Agency, a business that had been doing vacation rentals since the 1970s. Before that, Isabel's parents did the same. Isabel's here with us tonight. And before that, her father, Tudor Hall's parents, owned and operated the Hall House, which took up most of the block between 5th, Chestnut, and 6th Street. Our family is no stranger to knowing what it means to invite paying guests to experience the wonder of Highlands. Sure, in the early days, it was for the whole season. I mean, we didn't have any good roads. With the progression of travel, paved roads, and the commerce afforded in Highlands, those families found they could come for a weekend as well. Many of those families continue to come for years. The families grew, and then they brought their grandchildren. And many renters end up buying here and becoming a vital part of this community. All I'm asking is please make the right choice for all concerned. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tucker Chambers. Thank you. All right, I will now move to the next sign-in sheet, and that would be Gary Bogan.
All right, thanks for your time tonight. Just to let you know what it's like living next to a short-term rental. A house 2 doors down from us sold 2 years ago. It's a 3-bedroom house. They put 12 beds in it. They have parties every weekend there. It's ridiculous. We live on Sherwood Forest Road, which is zone 1. A corporation just bought 5 lots on Sherwood Forest. They're building short-term rentals. They've made it known already. That's not right. I just got to say, most of the people here are for short-term rentals. They've never lived next door to one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Patty and Steve, I think, Nay or K? Okay. All right, thank you. The next person would be Michael Ackerson. Michael?
Thank you for allowing us to express our opinions regarding your impending decision regarding short-term rentals. My story is similar to a lot of yours. I am for short-term rentals. My wife and I purchased our home in Mount Laurie subdivision in November 2020 with the full understanding that we would be able to use it as short-term rental. We made our purchase decision very clear to our realtor. We looked at the current UDO and we made our purchase decision based on that. Our realtor was very specific. We were very concerned about any city ordinances that we didn't know about. Our realtor was very savvy in terms of short-term rentals in the market. She actually owned a short-term rental in downtown Highlands. Active rentals, and she actually steered us away from short-term rentals that had restrictions. So she put us up in Mount Laurie and several short-term rentals up there, which we got to know many of those people, all real supportive. So we basically made the plunge. We took the plunge. We bought the property. It was in massive distress. 73 Mount Laurie, you guys may know it. It had the high 14-foot high timbers, very dangerous piece of property. We had that all redone. We made that purchase decision. We invested significantly in the property, almost to the tune of $200,000. Somebody else said they invested that plus. So I can assure you that our neighbors in Mount Laurie are very appreciative of the improvements that we've made to that property. I can tell you that, had we known about the ordinances and this issue, we wouldn't have bought the property, not in a million years. Nor would we have obviously we wouldn't have made the investment. I think Andrea and I have made a significant contribution to Highlands with the investment that we've made. We currently utilize Chambers Realty, and they have done they do a magnificent job. I think we've had extensive conversations with them about, hey, what brought all this on? How many complaints have you had? And very, very few that they're aware of. They do a great job screening the renters coming into our property and all their properties. And I think they do a fantastic job. We do have outside cameras so we can kind of check in on our tenants. And to date, thank God, we haven't had any issues with short-term rentals, and we've had several. So I would just, regarding the ordinance and the proposed changes to the ordinance, I think you've got some great things in there. I hate the restriction on short-term rentals, 14 days in R1. That's where we are. I think I don't like that at all. Many of us don't. I think love the enforcement idea that so many people have talked about, the noise, the trash issues, things like that. So I think it's an enforcement issue. I think you guys are so far, you're moving quickly on a situation that you don't have the facts on. I think somebody said it best. I think the impact study is absolutely a must. You have to understand that, particularly to the town of, obviously to that town of Highlands, but go short-term rentals. We're going to fight it to the end. I'm psyched. I think we win.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Kirk.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and have my views heard. I have one comment and one concern. First of all, I've been in this community since 2007. For the last year and a half, I have run short-term rentals, several. And I've had hundreds of guests that love Highlands. That come here on average 2 to 3 days. Those rental facilities were in the county and in R1 residents. The people they come to visit their parents here. They come for weddings, they come to hike, they come to shop, and they always enjoy the restaurants. So they're beautiful people. Like I said, I've never had a complaint about the individuals. I do go through Airbnb. They filter the people. I filter the people and have strict rules and regulations, and I hold them accountable. If there's any activity that I feel is that's just a comment, but so I hope and I support short-term rentals. My concern is on the revenues. Early on, there was comments in the paper, there was articles about the short-term rentals brought in 1.7 to 2.4 million annual revenues. And there were 350 homes in R1 that were, and that's reasonable, that amount of income. However, that's revenues to the county and to the state, county and the city that may have to be covered in some other manner. I'm permanent here. I'm retired on a fixed income. I enjoy my guest. I enjoy interacting with the short-term rental clients. And I don't like the idea of having to pay additional taxes if it can be avoided. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gary Hester.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, to allow us to speak tonight. My name is Gary Hester, and my parents have owned our property, which is in R1, since the late 1980s. We've actually been coming up here since 1965 and renting places each time we stay. My mom, sister, and I are current owners. They had passed away 11 years ago. And I just want to let you know, I drove all the way up here just for this meeting from Orlando, Florida. We do come up as often as we can, but we also rent our place out on Airbnb throughout the year for approximately 6 months. We do have strict rules and regulations and have never had a complaint with any of our guests. If we did, they would never be allowed to rent again from us. We and our guests are supporting not only the local restaurants, hardware, grocery, and other stores and establishments for many years, also our local maid service, plumbers, landscapers, electricians, painters, and many others. We've been paying taxes on this property for 40 years and have also been paying taxes to the city of Highlands through Airbnb as well. There are not enough hotel rooms available for all of the tourists that visit Highlands, so short-term rentals are greatly needed to keep the Highlands economy growing. I cannot believe that you even considered canceling or restricting our guests or our livelihood. Please do not do that. Allow us to continue with STRs. Thank you for listening tonight and your consideration. Thank you. Yield back the rest of my time to save Highlands.
Our next speaker is Debbie Bach.
Hi, thank you. I started coming to Highlands about 30 years ago with my parents. We rented for several years and always stayed in short-term rentals. Always loved Highlands, fell in love with Highlands. And then several years later, my husband and I decided maybe we should just take the plunge from Atlanta and build a home here, which we did. We now own several major businesses, a gas station, convenience store, a restaurant, a small hotel, and a home building business, all which benefit from short-term rentals. We love sharing our town, our beautiful town, with all of the out-of-towners. We meet people every day in all of our businesses, especially the bar, the restaurant, and feel very, very lucky to wake up here every morning. I request Derek Allen to represent me, and I hope y'all will consider especially the financial burden that this short-term rental can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Bach.
Thank you. I'm David Bach, and as my wife said, we have several businesses in town. We do not have short-term rentals. We don't own those. I actually do live next door to a short-term rental out on Flat Mountain. And I've had a bad experience, which I know some people have. Luckily, that rental's being managed by David B. I put a phone call into David B. He was out there at 11:30 at night and solved that problem immediately. And that's one time over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. So again, short-term rentals are important to the town. They support our businesses. We pay a lot of taxes to businesses. Me not being a resident of Highlands, I pay taxes, and as Buzz reminds me, I pay taxes without representation because I don't get to vote you guys in or out. So, but I'm happy to pay the taxes because we love the town. We love the opportunity that we have had in the town with our businesses, with the opportunity to have our family up here, to live up here. And we just need to manage those short-term rentals, enforce the laws, and do a better job of what we're doing with it. And I hope this board can work as hard as the planning board did with what their decisions were and help bring this town back together, because I think we kind of let it get out of hand with neighbors against neighbors here. And we're just, that upsets me more than anything. So appreciate all the hard work that you have done and will continue to do. You're all my friends and appreciate working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Matt Bunning.
Matt Bunning. I'll be brief as well. I completely agree with you. You know, I've gotten to know a lot of short-term renters and people from each side a lot. And believe it or not, we're all Highlanders and we all want 98% of the same thing. You know, so I wanted to just kind of preach the message of unity here, which is it's working. I've not heard one person say this town is going to hell. We love it and we don't want it to change. No one wants it to change. No one wants it to be Gatlinburg. So I would say when you look at stuff, you know, how do we improve it? Not how do we change it? You know, and I think we're doing a great job moving forward, doing that. Someone asked for the stats of what are the complaints. Last year, 5 people called in to complain about noises for short-term rental. So this is not chaos. This is success. We want to keep the success and tweak it. We've never had a chance to kind of address it and make it better. And I think we can make it better. I'm also going to do one stat I hear a lot is 62% of people were against short-term rentals in the plan. That's not correct. The question was, are you concerned about short-term rentals in the planning? Big difference being against and being concerned. Someone would say, are you concerned this meeting was go to midnight tonight? Yes, I'm concerned. But I'm not against it because we need to speak. And this is what's great about this town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Andrew Kaiser.
Good evening. I'm one of these folks that are about 10 years away from retirement, have history and family connections here. My parents live here. I had an opportunity to buy a house in 2019. I'm sure glad I did because I couldn't afford it now. It's about a half a mile from the Ugly Dog, which I love. You know, people that stay at our house are there generally for a wedding or for, you know, just to take in the weekend. And they like it and they want to stay there because it's easily walkable downtown. They don't have to drive down and park downtown. It doesn't seem like that. We've had no complaints from anybody. It doesn't seem like that's something that is screaming to be stopped. And I think I understand it does a lot of good for the local economy. So I'm in favor of being able to continue to do that until I can get my kids through school and get up here and live with you folks, good folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Richardson.
Hi, I'm John Richardson. I live on Satula Ridge. I've owned a house here in Highlands for 10 years, been coming to Highlands for about 40 years. So it's sort of a place for us to be. Pardon me, my eyesight's a little screwy, but everything. I did turn in written comments, but I had a few other comments. We were asked to follow the planning board recommendations to comment on them.
Mhm.
And I heard earlier talking about enforcement. The way these proposals are written, keeping up with them is going to be a really hard proposal to do for the town. It's going to be a new challenge to you. The town currently has problems enforcing ordinances currently on your books. One of the examples was the temporary sign ordinance, where you have short-term rentals that have sign in their yard year round. That's not temporary. The other one, I noticed that in the January town meeting report that we had identified warnings on Christmas lights, but no warnings on garbage cans being left on the street. So enforcement is what we would want to do. Why would we create a complicated and virtually unenforceable ordinance like the one that's being proposed here? You got to decide where the funded resources and the manpower will come that are required to enforce this. This was not discussed in the recommendations. I'm going to talk about some of the sections, the language on tourist homes, that section. One of the sections changed to allow tourist homes in R1 zones with 175-day maximum. How are you going to keep track of that? You got, how do you keep track of the 100 thing? Tourist homes are a bit commercial business. Why are we allowing this permission? Why are we proposing this permission? Go to section 6.5.18, which was the added section. How's the town going to track and enforce the incidental exception of 2 rentals per year with a 2-week total occupancy on houses? It mentions that. You're going to have somebody in their house all year long. Zoning certificates look to be the only source of revenue which support the proposals. Are the whole house short-term rental zoning certificates a permanent document for a property with no expiration? Are they transferable and no removal process for any violations? That needs to be addressed. How's the town, this was mentioned earlier, how's the town going to enforce the proposed 14-day minimum? Like the temporary on-premise sign ordinance, creative renters will develop scenarios within the regulation that would allow for multiple renters within the 14-day minimum. That could be them forming a group and calling them the renter, and the renter be out of a group. All right, the other part was the 3 violations part. It was talked about in a 12-month period. Is there going to be any violations that will, quote, terminate your short-term rental and take permission away? How's the section going to be enforced? Again, I asked that. Again, the revenue stream to fund these enforcements, it's going to take somebody to do that. It's going to take some work. Talked about grandfather. I heard about grandfather. The planning board passed it off to y'all. Congratulations. To grandfather the existing, I don't recommend that. It discriminates because you're going to have a house in there that somebody's grandfathered in, somebody's going to buy a house later and want to rent, and they can't. The other thing is the grandfathers need a short-term, a sunset clause in them. I'm a grandfather. I don't propose to be around forever. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers list, but as the presiding officer, I want to do one thing for Mr. Allen, who was representing the folks with the Safe Highlands, and also Mr. Nalbon, who was representing the Neighborhood Coalition. I know that each one of you had some people that yielded, so I will give you the floor for 3 minutes if you have anything that you'd like to add at this time.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Thank you, commissioners. It's been a long evening. As we expected, a lot of conversation about I have to be allowed to short-term rent because I am entitled to make as much money as I want to, or if I can't short-term rent, I can't afford my property. But what's left out of the conversation by the short-term rental investors is that the people of Highlands, the residents of Highlands, they have vested rights. They have grandfathered rights. They moved into Highlands some decades ago into single-family neighborhoods where commercial activities, businesses were prohibited. And we can have lots of conversations about words and semantics, but at the end of the day, what the short-term rental investors are doing is they are running hotels. I don't check in or check out of my house, nor do the other members of our neighborhood coalition. We don't have a 4 p.m. We can't get in our house until then. What the short-term rental investors are doing are running hotels, motels, tourist homes, overnight accommodations, which in fact are a commercial use, are a commercial business, which for greater than 50 years have been prohibited in Highlands single-family neighborhoods. And our simple request is that we maintain that prohibition and we enforce the existing rules against these commercial businesses in our single-family neighborhoods. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. I will ask if Mr. Justice, if you have any comments. I know you've been here and we appreciate you being here.
I thought it was a well done. Be very proud of yourself.
Thank you. And I do want to thank everybody that participated. I concur with what Mr. Justice has said, that we did have a very positive, very civil and very informative public hearing. And I appreciate all of the people that attended and participated in the hearing. Now, at the end here, we have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have some move? Second. Would any of the commissioners like to make a comment before we adjourn?
Good job, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to say all in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Thank you. This hearing is closed. Yeah.